Welcome to my channel, Universal Laws, an audiobook by Conny Méndez.
The principle of mentalism. The first principle of Hermes is widely regarded as the most fundamental of all the principles of creation. This principle, which you have already seen in the textbook Metaphysics Within Everyone's Reach, is summarized in the phrase "all is mind." You are fully aware that everything is mind, and this understanding you have experienced in practice. Let me emphasize again the importance of not accepting anything that you cannot prove for yourself. If you find concepts that you find difficult to understand at this time, do not worry. You can leave them for a later time. In time, these concepts will become clearer intuitively, without the need to resort to external sources. You know that thoughts are things, they are matter. They manifest outwardly. They become events, illnesses, stumbling blocks, rewards, misfortunes or happiness, depending on whether they are negative or positive. Nobody is to blame for what may happen to you in life. You alone are the producer of everything that happens to you. It all depends on the mental climate in which you live. If you are constantly grumpy, no wonder you are treated badly. If you are cheerful, laughing, happy and optimistic, no wonder you are popular, loved and welcomed everywhere, and everything that happens to you is good. We have free will to choose good or evil, negative or positive. Let it be done according to your word. What you expect to happen, what you decree to happen, will happen. What you deny will not happen. When you change your way of thinking, the outward manifestation is transformed. St. Paul the Apostle expressed it, "We are transformed by the renewing of our minds." If you feed certain ideas, you have no power and no way to avoid the consequences. These are the things you will see happening on the outside. Every condition and situation in your life is the embodiment of a belief you have in the subconscious. It is lodged there and producing its equal on the outside. Your true beliefs are what you see manifested. But there is a big difference between what you truly believe, what you think you believe, and what you think you should believe. It is not difficult to distinguish between these three things because you will only see happen what you truly believe. You can judge for yourself. You have heard it said many times that we are made in the image and likeness of God. That means we are creators like Him. God created the universes with His mind. We create our world with our mind. The world we live in is neither bad nor good. Everything is judged by the lens through which we see it. I will explain it to you with the following example. Think of a lamp with a bulb with 100 spark plugs. Now put a greenish tint on it. The clean colors have become dirty. The eyes have become blackened. Everything has become dark. Now change that screen and put on a red screen. Everything has been transformed. The greens have become dirty. The reds have become livelier. They are the same objects but seen with a different pair of eyes. You know that behind that screen there is always the white bulb with 100 spark plugs. What you are seeing is not a lie. The color is there, but it is only an appearance. The true color is another. You can remove that color at any time you want. Exactly the same thing happens in your life. Change your belief, change the mental position you are holding, and everything will be transformed. And why has it not been known before? Why is it not taught by religions or cults or other occult organizations? That is the question asked by the disciples of this new teaching. Because all the other truth-seeking organizations are the steps that we have been taking in our evolution. Those steps have been appearing on earth as humans could bear them, understand them, absorb them. All the people who are adhering to those sects and religions is because they still need them. All those who are studying the new teaching for the age have already surpassed the others. This instruction is that of the enlightened and initiated. It is that which was studied by the wise astrologers, by the so-called Magi kings who visited the child Jesus in Bethlehem, by the high priests, by the companions of Moses, in short, by Hermes Trismegistus, which has never been hidden except to minds that could not yet assimilate it. Already today, the majority of humanity is sufficiently adult to be able to digest the higher teachings that begin with psychology, metaphysics, hermetic principles, and then what we will be giving in due course in this clear and simple form. The principle of correspondence. The first sentence of the Bible says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void." In the second part of booklet number 1, metaphysical meaning of the Ten Commandments. You learned the threefold symbolism that the Bible employs, and you also got an idea of the way the principle of correspondence works, whose motto is, as below is above, so above is below. Which is to say that in our own earthly environment, and in everything around us, we can read, decipher, translate how these same things occur on other planes. That every action and every condition has its analogy or its correspondence on all other planes of existence, always bearing in mind that as life rises, experiences and powers expand. Let us take an earthly example, and, in accordance with the principle of correspondence, let us deduce what this God whom he urges us to love is really like, in spite of the inconceivable image of cruelty that has been given of him in the teachings. How many times have you felt dissatisfied, annoyed before the great mystery that human beings are born in original sin because of Adam and Eve? What has your common sense whispered in your ear? Have you said to yourself, but what the hell do I have to do with that couple that existed, if it existed, thousands of centuries ago, and how long will we be paying the debt? Has your common sense not told you that? And have you not forced it to be silent for the simple fact that your elders taught you not to analyze the divine mysteries without the penalty of some terrible punishment? And in the face of that other great mystery that has always perplexed you, God knows everything. And have you not asked yourself, does he know before a creature is born whether it will be condemned to eternal fire? And before daring to go on with the question that follows, did not someone tell you, hush, we are not allowed to probe God's designs? And did not your common sense tell you that to such an image of bestial cruelty it is not possible to love? Common sense, that which someone called the most common of senses, is the expression of divine wisdom on our human plane. You already learned this in the second part. If you notice that some of those around you lack common sense, you can be sure that if it is not mental retardation, his mind has been so restrained and repressed by those who have surrounded him that he does not dare to trust his own discernment and always goes out to consult the opinion of others, which manifests in his common life confusion and nonsense. The Bible says that man is made in the image and likeness of God. What does an ordinary man do when he is driving his car and a child runs into him? Does he not make a superhuman effort, braking with all his body, his senses and his reflexes? Does he not forget his own life, throwing the car aside to save the life of the child? According to the great mystery quoted above, the man should emulate the insensitive deity he knows and continue glacially on his way, run over the child and leave him disemboweled in the middle of the street. For if man, who is but an atom in creation, puts all his poor resources on behalf of a strange child, the infinite, all-powerful God, our Father, whose essence has formed that man, has infinite resources to redeem, protect, and save our creation. This is the way to apply in practice the principle of correspondence that says, as above, so below, so below, so above. By studying the monad, one arrives at the angel, said Hermes. We cannot judge and appreciate exactly what a higher condition of life is like than the one we are living in. A poor man thinks of a rich man, how nice it will be to have it all. He is not experiencing it and will not be able to fully appreciate it until he is rich, although he can anticipate the degree, judging by what he himself feels when he achieves satisfactions in accordance with his economic level. The same thing happens between planes or dimensions. The ant lives in the first dimension. The mind in it is nothing more than an instinct. It is not even possible for it to calculate the life of a man. This is what I have wanted to come to in order to explain the term consciousness, which we use so much in metaphysics. And when we mention spiritual consciousness and material consciousness, the right of consciousness, etc., it is the state of advancement or backwardness. It is the being conscious of something, in full knowledge of something, by the fact of experiencing it in one's own flesh or in one's own mind. If it were possible for the ant to meditate on man, and if it could be taught to apply the principle of correspondence, it would have to be told approximately, a man is a being like you, who makes his house like you, who looks for food like you, who has his government like you, and rules of good living like you. Nothing else can grasp him because nothing else has entered his plane of consciousness. On every plane there are advanced ones who are already almost on the point of ascending to the next plane of consciousness, and who already glimpse or sense the higher conditions. Among the animals there are dogs, horses, etc., of whom it is said, "He has but little time to speak." Among men there is a Jesus, for example, who descends to return to a lower plane for the purpose of teaching how to advance. We are already between planes, living and learning the conditions of the mental plane to which we are graduating. It is said that we are already developing spiritual consciousness. That is, we are becoming aware of things unsuspected by the great majority living in material consciousness. This is why the great majority rejects the idea that the flying saucers may be spaceships directed by supermen who come to scrutinize us, just as we would stop to scrutinize a little bird in its nest, hatching its eggs. They pry at us for, as below so above, the principle of vibration. This is the third Hermetic principle, whose motto is everything is in motion, everything vibrates. Let us begin by thinking of the propeller of an airplane. When it is stationary, we see the blades, two wooden oars fixed to a shaft. Suddenly they start to move, they accelerate, and after a while we see nothing. They become transparent. This is what happens with high frequency. This is why we do not see the disincarnated spirits. They live in our midst, but in a frequency of vibration indifferent to that of our bodies of flesh and bone. On the other hand, the immobility of a rock, which also moves at its own frequency of vibration, is because its vibratory rate is excessively slow. Positive thinking vibrates at a very high frequency, its colors bright, clear, luminous. Negative thinking vibrates slowly, and its colors are dull. The more negative, the darker, and the lower the tone of its sound. Positive thought, like the mind that is polarized on the positive plane, cannot be overpowered by a low vibration unless there is some negative concept or idea clinging somewhere in the individual, or unless the individual allows his thought to become negative. Jesus said, "The God of this world comes to me and finds nothing in me to lay hold of." The God of this world is the negative pole, which is what reigns in most minds. The positive pole, we have already established, is of high vibration. The negative pole of low vibration. Low sounds are of slow vibration, high sounds of high vibration. Dark colors are of low frequencies and bright colors of high frequency. Everything that is matter is always in circular motion, revolving around something larger like the planets revolving around the sun. This is the universal pattern for everything material. The Hermeticists have always taught the vibratory motion of light, heat, magnetism, cohesion, which is the principle of molecular attraction that we commonly call love, as well as that great mystery called gravitation or gravity. Today everybody knows the relationship between movement and sound, although it has not yet been studied on our earthly plane, that is, nobody considers it of great importance. Who has not perceived the hum of an electric fan rotating at maximum speed? The rotation produces different musical sounds. A passing airplane emits a musical sound from which several other sounds emanate. These are called harmonics, as is known to musicians. When any musical note is struck, say on a piano, two other notes are struck in higher octaves. The tones that sound are a third and a fifth note of the struck tone. This harmonic combination is called the major chord. Generally, the human ear does not perceive sounds above a certain frequency. When something rotates emitting a sound that is increasing in speed, past the frequency imperceptible to the human, you begin to see degrees of color. Starting with dark red, as the speed increases, the color becomes brighter, then orange, then yellow, then green, blue, indigo, and finally violet. If the speed increases, it becomes white, and from there onwards the so-called X-rays, then electricity, and finally magnetism. Further on, we will be in mental and spiritual planes. Einstein said that the more he studied electricity, the closer he came to finding the spirit. For humans, these things are still unexplainable. They pertain to astral planes where our astral, etheric, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies reside. States of mind vibrate and throw those vibrations into space in sounds and colors. All mental states are launched outward from the body that creates them. They go striking kindred bodies, as musical instruments do. These vibrations affect in good or bad to other minds, increasing the vibrations of anger, which are magnetically attracted by another who is also angry, which increase each other. The emotional state worsens and can even lead to crime when the affected persons are not in the habit of controlling themselves. Thoughts and ideas about God, about the masters of wisdom, about the higher self, or about everything noble and pure have very high vibrations. These elevate any lower vibrations and can cure diseases, solve problems, and so on. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has two poles, everything has its pair of opposites. The similar and the antagonistic are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes touch. All paradoxes can be reconciled. This fourth great Hermetic principle embodies the truth that all manifested things have two aspects, two poles, which are a pair of opposites with innumerable degrees between the two extremes. Those ancient and eternal paradoxes that have confused minds, such as everything is and is not at the same time, thesis and antithesis, are identical in nature, and the extremes touch are explained if this principle is meditated upon. The law of polarity explains that what exists between diametrically opposed things is only a matter of degree, and affirms that every pair of opposites can be reconciled by the application of this law. Let us examine this principle on the different planes. On the physical plane, we find that heat and cold are of identical nature, the difference being only a matter of degrees. The thermometer indicates the degrees of temperature, the lower pole being called cold and the upper heat. Between these two there are many degrees of heat and cold, and of these degrees, the upper one is the hottest in relation to the lower, which is the coldest. There is absolutely no fixed type. It is all a matter of ratio and degrees. There is no place on the thermometer where the hot ceases and the cold begins. Absolutely everything comes down to more or less high or low vibrations. The very words high and low that we are using are but two poles of the same thing. They are relative. So it is with east and west. If we travel around the world in an easterly direction, we arrive at a point called the west. If we march far enough north, we soon find ourselves traveling south. The same principle manifests itself in light and darkness, which, in short, are the same thing. Where does darkness end? Where does light begin? What is the difference between big and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between positive and negative? The musical scale is the same. Starting from B, we come to find the B. The same principle operates in the same way on the mental plane. Love and hate are regarded as diametrically opposed and irreconcilable, but if we apply the principle of polarity, we find that there is neither absolute love nor absolute hate, different one from the other. The two are but terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Starting at any point on the scale, we find more love and less hate if we ascend it, or less love and more hate if we descend it. There are many degrees of love and hate, and there is also a middle point where liking and disliking are mixed in such a way that it is impossible to distinguish them. Courage and fear also come under the same rule. Pairs of opposites exist in everything. Where we find one thing, we also find its opposite. The latter is what makes it possible to transmute one mental state into another along the lines of polarity. Different things cannot transmute into each other, but things of the same kind can. For example, love cannot transmute into east or west, but it can transmute into hate, and likewise hate, changing its polarity, can transmute into love. Courage can transmute into fear, and vice versa. Hard things can become soft and so on, the transmutation always taking place between things of the same kind, but of different degree. In the case of a cowardly man, if his mental vibrations are raised along the fear value line, he will be filled with courage and despise danger. And a lazy man can become active and energetic by simply polarizing along the laziness-diligence line. Once the principle of polarity is understood, it is immediately seen that the mental changes we wish to see in our enemies, friends, children, employees, and so on, are possible by applying the law. It is like producing a slide along a scale. Namely, it is not a matter of transmuting one thing into something completely different, but of reducing it to a simple change of degree of the same thing. Mental states belong to innumerable categories, each of which has its opposite, and along its own line transmutation is possible. Spirit and matter are poles of the same thing, the intermediate states or planes being a matter of vibratory degrees only. These two poles in all that exists are themselves classified by their vibratory degree, that is, their frequency, into positive and negative. Thus, love is positive, hate is negative, faith is positive, fear is negative, activity is positive in relation to inertia, white is positive versus black is negative, truth is positive, lying is negative, prosperity is positive, lack is negative, the higher is positive, the lower is negative. We must remember that the tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the pole shifting of our own mental states through the art of polarization, the phenomenon of mental influence in its many phases demonstrates that the principle can be extended to embrace mental influences. That is, mental states can be produced by induction of others. It is thus possible to polarize an environment, a situation. Most of the results obtained by mental treatments are obtained by applying this principle. We, the students of metaphysics, never use this principle in any other sense than that of good, for as will be seen later in the principle of rhythm and that of cause and effect, which are the laws of boomerang, whatever we do to ourselves is returned to us in identical form sooner or later. The practice of this principle enables us to better understand our own mental states, as well as those of others, and makes us certain that these states are purely a matter of degrees, being able to raise the lower vibrations at will, changing the polarity and making us masters of these degrees instead of their slaves. This law enables us to help others intelligently by polarizing situations. For example, you already know how to greet, recognize, and awaken the Christ in your fellow man. It is simply remembering that the higher self, the I am, the truth of the other is perfection. In New Age parlance, it is called the immaculate concept. The more you employ this practice, the more you will forget the faults you have seen or saw in others. The moment will come when it will not affect you in the least, because you will feel in your perfect security that this neighbor and brother is only manifesting a lie, that just by knowing it, you elevate your vibratory rate towards the positive, his truth. The vibratory frequencies of a trained metaphysician often manage to transform an environment in which he penetrates simply by his presence. Just by the sight of his eyes, his smile, his peace and joy, he polarizes mental states. With a few positive words, he transmutes negative foreign concepts prevailing in the environment because he changes the mood of those present. They are filled with hope where before they were hopeless. In this sense, the power of Jesus was so great that when he saw, he healed the sick as he passed by. That is why he said to them, "Do not sin again." The degree of realization that the student, the practitioner, has in recognizing the immaculate concept in others above and beyond or in spite of, the appearance they are manifesting completely heals or improves the condition. It all depends upon his own faith. Remember that faith is knowledge. The metaphysician knows that disease is an appearance produced by a mental form, a creation of the individual. It is ignorance and credulity. He knows that eternal truth is life. He knows that a disease is manifesting itself because that brother is actually believing in the mental form he has created. The gospel says he is bewitched by his own creation. We are going to say that it is belief in the permanence of his own creation, that he is living. According to the principle we are studying, we already know that it is possible to polarize, to transmute one's own creation by sliding the mind up the line of positive, thinking of health and life. Life is life and cannot become death. One can think of death and produce it, but by thinking of life, one transmutes death into life. Life is indestructible. It is foreseen that it itself, without human minds blocking its way with their false beliefs, will continue. Against what you choose, no one can but yourself. If you prefer to place yourself in the negative pole, you will have everything that belongs to it. If you prefer the positive pole, you will have everything that belongs to it. To the positive pole belongs the smile. To the negative pole belongs the frown. If you want to change the pole in full negative manifestation, smile, declare the good present in the manifestation, bless it, and add, "And I want to see it." That is all. You will see black transmute into white, sad into joyful, evil into good. Try it. Polarize all the situations that come your way, all the environments you enter, all the beings you talk to, and you will hear them exclaim, "But how good I feel." Polarize your children, your friends, your employees, your students, and you will be what Jesus called the salt of the earth. The undesirable is transformed by changing its polarity. If you yourself do not know how to do it quickly, do it from degree to degree, from condition to condition, from pole to pole, from vibration to vibration. You must first acquire the art of changing your own polarity in order to be able to change the polarity of others. Just as you can transform the polarity of others by bringing good with you, so you can bring the negative wherever you go. These are the so-called turkeys. They are always polarized in the negative pole and carry it everywhere. To master the art of polarizing, you have to practice it like everything else you wish to master. The principle of polarity is the truth. The results depend on the practice of the student. The law of rhythm. Everything ebbs and flows. Everything has its periods of advance and retreat. Everything ascends and descends. Everything moves like a pendulum. The measure of its movement to the right is the same as that of its movement to the left. The rhythm is the compensation. This principle embodies the truth that everything manifests itself in a certain back and forth motion. In everything an average oscillation manifests itself, an ebb and flow, a pendulum-like movement from one pole to the other, according to the principle of polarity to which rhythm is closely related. Rhythm manifests itself between the two poles of everything. This does not mean that the rhythmic oscillation goes to the extremes of each pole, for this happens very rarely, and it is very difficult to establish the extreme polar opposites in most cases. But the oscillation takes place toward one pole first, and then toward another pole. There is always an oscillation, an advance and a retreat, an elevation and a fall, manifesting itself in all things and phenomena in the universe. This law applies to everything: suns, worlds, minds, energy, spirit, matter, animals, vegetables, and so on. We see it in the history of life, in all things, in the rise and fall of nations. That is, in all these, the principle is at work. On the spiritual plane, for example, there is always an emanation, followed by an absorption. We, emanated from God, are born, descend into material consciousness, and then die, as absorbed into spiritual consciousness. This is our great rhythm. It is an ascending rhythmic evolution in our birth and death. It is the breath and aspiration of Brahma, as the Brahmins say. The universes are created, reach the lowest point of materiality, and then the oscillation back begins. The suns are born, reach the peak of their power, and the process of retrogradation begins. After untold eons, they become great masses of material, awaiting another impulse that will carry them into another new solar life cycle. These are the great rhythms, but we see the principle in everything. Thus, in the great created philosophical movements of any kind, governments, politicians of the moment, they are born, grow, reach maturity, decay, die, only to be reborn again. Everything repeats itself over and over again, just like the pulse, which is the smallest rhythm we can see or feel. Day and night, the seasons, nothing is at rest. Everything has its own rhythm. We also see it in all phases of human activity. The tides of life ebb and flow according to law. Thus we see that we begin something with great enthusiasm, that we do not know when or why it declines, and then it returns, and so this principle drives us, because it, like all law, is immutable, it is always fulfilled. But by studying it, knowing it, and knowing that it is always in function, we learn to use it, just as we do with the law of materialism, or cause and effect, or polarity. In other words, these laws are neither good nor bad. They simply guarantee the harmonious functioning of the universe, and it is our knowledge and use of them that makes them good or bad for each person. In this case, for example, we know that the principle of rhythm cannot be annulled, but neither can we allow, once we know it, that it plays with us and takes us from there to here, like a blade of straw. Rather, we learn to evade its effects to a certain degree, a degree that depends on the mastery we have of the principle of rhythm. We learn to use it rather than be used by it. We learn to polarize ourselves at the point where we wish to stay and rise above the pendulum swing. Everyone who has acquired a certain degree of self-mastery performs this to some extent, consciously or unconsciously. The master performs it consciously and, by mastery of the law, attains a degree of equilibrium, stability, and mental firmness almost impossible for the majority to conceive, who come and go in a continuous undulating motion, always driven by their own rhythm. We know that there are two planes of manifestations of mental phenomena, that is, two planes of consciousness, one higher and one lower. So, if we rise to the higher plane, we escape the pendulum oscillation, and it only manifests itself on the lower plane. In other words, the pendulum swing occurs on the unconscious plane, and our consciousness is therefore unaffected. We call this neutralization. Its operation consists in raising the I above the vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity, so that the negative swing of the pendulum does not manifest in the consciousness, and one is not affected by it. It is the same as rising above a thing and allowing it to pass underneath. The one who knows and practices the law polarizes himself at the required pole and, by a procedure similar to refusing or denying to participate in the retrograde swing, remains in his position and allows the pendulum to swing backward on the unconscious plane. The law of cause and effect. The mind is an engine. Thoughts are force or energy generated by the mind. This energy leaves our mind in vibrations, in waves that, by the grace of the law of rhythm, returns to us, bringing us the future that we have collected. I have just told you that the future is analogous to what we have sown. That is, if you do good to someone or if you speak well of someone, those words or that act come out in color vibrations. That color attracts vibrations of the same color, and they come back to you, increasing the good you did. Beautiful things happen to you, miraculous things, and you say, "What a coincidence! Look what happened today in the morning, what a marvel." There are no coincidences, they cannot exist because there is no law of chance. There are only exact laws called principles because they are immutable. The principle of polarity fixes what you do and say in one of the two poles, positive or negative. That is, what you think, say, or do is either positive or negative. There is no third pole. If you think or speak ill of someone, it is negative. You have sown it in the negative pole. It comes out gray or black, depending on the amount of evil it contains. It picks up on its way a lot of energy of the same color and comes back to you, increasing in strength. A shock happens to you, an accident. It will always be something unpleasant. There you have then the explanation of what happens to you. If you criticize, you will be criticized. If you harm someone or something, you will be harmed, or something of yours will be harmed. If you are unjust, hard, that injustice also returns you that hardness. Those causes you sow must bear fruit in effects before you are released. If you sow discord, you must reap discord. If you sow kindness, love, help, you must reap kindness, love, or help. Whatever you sow, whether constructive or destructive, you will see it return. How can people go on believing that they can, with impunity, be cruel, slanderous, ill-tempered, violent, mean, and expect to have health, love, fortune, happiness, i.e. all the good things of life, if they only sow bad things? The whole world spends its time sending out hatred, selfishness, arguments, quarrels, and reaps the harvest in argument, chaos, wars, and troubles of all kinds. It is not always possible to return the harvest immediately. Planet Earth has an enormous amount of accumulated debts from all over the world, and it vents wherever it can, in storms, cyclones, earthquakes, marine disasters, landslides, floods, volcanic eruptions, and so on. Many times the people we have harmed in some way die before we have been able to settle the account with them, and there has to be an opportunity to settle it in the future, because God is infinite mercy, and does not leave a child of his in eternal punishment without giving him an opportunity to settle his debts. That is why God has instituted reincarnation, to give the opportunity to pay debts and also to give the opportunity to collect the carnal and material good that we have deserved and that cannot be collected in the invisible and immaterial plane. It would not be fair for us to remain without the reward for our efforts and goodness. Of course, it is a question of things that have no rewards but material ones. One cannot stay there forever if one has things pending here. And it should be remembered that the motto of these studies is, I keep my mind broad. You here meditate and resolve to believe what seems fair, logical, reasonable, and common sense. What you cannot swallow, accept, leave for later. Some things are so new to you that you will find it difficult to accept them all of a sudden. Therefore, I recommend that you think with a broad, open mind without closing the door immediately. I warn you from now on that the brain cells are awakening little by little. If one receives a new idea, there are dormant cells that have not yet vibrated, and that this new idea awakens them. When you have just woken up, you do not yet know very well what is being said to you. After a while, after you have had a shower or breakfast, then you can absorb what is being said, can't you? So remember the law of correspondence. As above, so below. The same is true for cells that have just woken up. The law is the same for all. You are already beginning to see that so strange and mysterious thing that you call reincarnation has its reason for being based on harmony and divine mercy, and that it is not a bizarre and crazy thing. It is necessary to keep a broad mind because everything has an explanation. Reincarnation is a truth, and it is the only logical explanation for the apparent injustice you see. When you observe splendid, constructive people going through difficult situations, while others, so-called bad people, seem to be enjoying all the good things in life, you can be sure that there is no mistake and no injustice. Do you believe in God? Do you believe He is good or just? Then how can you believe that He is unjust? For everyone is encountering effects of previous causes that he has caused somewhere in the past, and of which he has no memory. If these people who have karmic debts wish within themselves to do service to other individuals, to balance and erase bad feelings, hey well, they are free of that debt. But if they cannot achieve these feelings and good desires, life will bring them together again as many times as necessary until it is fulfilled, and each time in closer association. Sometimes mother and child come into being, because the law of love is like this. It tries to dissolve enmity with love. When between two people there is an attraction of love and harmony, it is certain that they were in contact and harmonious association in a previous life, and can expand this much-needed quality in the world. When you notice a feeling of resistance against someone, it is that the sensations are reminiscent of a discordant or unpleasant association. It is very comforting to know that God's forgiveness for the misuse of His energy is always at hand for those who truly desire it. That eternal fire and eternal punishment invented by the religions of the past age to control the world through fear, superstition, and blind obedience is not true. Whatever the causes, whatever the sin, imperfection, impurity, or error that has been committed, there is a conscious way to transmute those errors. Do you know what transmute means? To dissolve, to erase completely and without cost. When humans realize that they themselves are the cause of all their ills and all their calamities, of all the limitations in their world, they suddenly have a sincere desire to make things right. That desire is the one that counts, and it is necessary for them to know that every kind of assistance is given to them. Until that time comes, the man or woman either rebels against the circumstances and even against God, or submits to the conditions believing that they are God's will. And of course, this is a lie. Now, and this is very important for you to remember, the moment the student realizes that the fabrications of his mind are what dictate his destiny and even the destiny of others, when he realizes that all his mistakes are in him and that no one, absolutely no one, but himself, can be blamed for what happens to him, he panics. He does it as usual, looking for someone to blame, someone to punish. What happens? He releases the body to the matter, throwing all the responsibility on it, and proceeds to punish it in the most merciless way. How? You will not believe it. With all the ancient flagellations and tortures to which the saints and martyrs were subjected, because that is what you have filed in your subconscious since the remote epochs of Christianity. Of course, no one takes a whip in his hand. That is no longer in fashion, but he proceeds to torture himself mentally. He proceeds to watch himself like a policeman and to say to himself, "Don't you see? You have already fallen again. You have already done it again. you are going to suffer the same consequences again. Of course, as this is a decree, the same consequences occur again. Not only, but a carte blanche power has been offered to a mental form of guilt, specially manufactured to continue to torture itself at every slip, and not let us progress. Every time you find yourself attacking yourself, nagging yourself, knowing it means that you are already aware of good and evil. It is only a matter of time, and not much time, for your subconscious to stop you before you commit the same sin again. It is the principle of confession. Sin confessed is half forgiven. For Catholic confession has had but one purpose, that of making us aware of when we have committed an infraction. The priest's forgiveness is nominal. The one who really forgives is the inner Christ, the one who guides us. It is he who guides and teaches us. All he has to do is to tell you and repeat mentally, "My higher self, which is the perfect Christ in me, is the one in charge of leading me without torture until my ascension." And once you have realized, meditated, and understood this, you will not sin again voluntarily, and the first gates of heaven will be opened to you. For all this proves that you have put all your goodwill, and the greatest teacher of all times, Jesus said, "Peace on earth to men of good will." The principle of generation. The motto of this principle is, everything has its masculine and feminine principle. Like all the previous ones, this principle is always in action. Nothing can exist without the principle of generation, that is, without its father and mother. Everything, absolutely everything, has a father and a mother, or its feminine base and its masculine base. It is not as commonly believed that the base is sex. This word sex applies only to the physical differences that exist between the male and the female, which is a very small slice or sector of the physical plane. Think about it and remember it. Sex is the difference that exists outwardly between the male and the female on the great physical plane. That is, sex is not the principle of generation. It is simply the presence of the male and the female in the whole of creation. Do you understand? In this sector of the physical plane, the principle is recognized, manifested, or shown by the difference of the sexes. On the higher planes, the principle takes higher forms, but each being contains within itself the two elements of the principle. The world has gone through thousands of conjectures about truth, which then become theories, teachings, sects, organizations, cults, religions. Whatever you hear of sects practicing pernicious teachings is nothing but a prostitution of the great natural principle of generation. All this is antiquated, fallen into disuse. The truth is always simple and natural. To the pure, all things are pure. To the wicked, all things are wicked. The word gender means to create, to conceive, to produce, while the word sex is limited to organic life. Science has not yet accepted this principle as a universal thing, nor can it even conceive it, because science is situated in the opposite camp. He who is mounted on a horse does not see the legs that make him go until he gets off and situates himself objectively. He will not be able to see those legs go. Thus, science, like religion, does not know that the one is representative of the father and the other is representative of the mother. Science is the proof that the father exists, that is, intelligence. Religion is the proof that the mother exists, that is, love. God is love and intelligence, mother and father, negative and positive. These are the two aspects of the Creator. It is absurd and ridiculous that science and religion continue to be enemies, the father against the mother and vice versa. Science mocks religion, and religion censures, criticizes, and reviles science. In this golden age, the age of Saint-Germain, they are discovering each other without realizing it exactly yet. Metaphysics gathers and explains this truth. Our great master Emmett Fox called this teaching the scientific prayer. A very important clarification must be made, and it is that one thing is religion and another is the church, and that the Mayan majority of humans do not know the difference and confuse one thing with the other, sometimes naming religion and other times the church, as if the two terms were one. Religion is the set of truths based on universal love, on charity, on filial and fraternal feelings, on the practice of love one another, and on loving God above all things and your neighbor as yourself. The word religion means something that is doubly bound, that is to say, religious, united by cohesion. and that is absolutely everything. Nor does it need anything else, since this cohesion is achieved by love. We have already said that the law of attraction, adhesion, and cohesion is the name that intelligence, science, Father, gives to love. Love is the term that the heart, Mother, gives to the law that attracts, unites, and adheres with such power that nothing can separate. All that follows therefrom, fervor, devotion, charity, etc., are typical of the mother. The role that the mother plays in a family, uniting and intertwining all her children through her love, her care, her teachings, her devotion, the attraction that she exerts on the whole family, that vibration that is the mother, who even after death continues to exert her invisible influence, reminding everyone that they are brothers, linked by the same father and united by the same mother. That is religion. The church is an organism or a human organization created by men. The term comes from ecclesia, Latin word that means gathering, that is, a group of scattered things with the purpose of gathering to pray, to practice pious works, to teach, etc. But after the first ecclesia was founded, it soon degenerated into an instrument of threats, punishments, dogmas, rules, indulgences, and special permissions, all to compel allegiance to it, not to religion, that is, but to the laws that the ecclesia imposed. Laws and physical and corporal obligations, limitations, rites and obligatory observances, all catalogued by the scribes, ordered by those ecclesias, especially paraphrased to confuse the terms ecclesia and religion in the naive minds of the primitive Christian times. Do you now understand the difference between church and religion? There are very few who love a set of hard and inflexible rules. They are based on fear and threat, although those who appear to be addicted to the church are only pretending lip service, feeling threatened, but in their private lives, and even more so in their ideas and feelings, they act in the complete opposite way. Science, on the other hand, acts with all the freedom that suits her. She is masculine even though she is called she is based on the earthly intellect, and since she does not feel, because feeling is one thing and intelligence is another, as we have already seen, no one restrains her, no one forces her, no one hinders her, no laws, no rules, no punishments. The only thing that has been imposed on her is, do not kill the human being, and she tries to save him at any cost, although she is allowed to kill the animals. Something so reprehensible, since these belong to the evolution called elementals, which are our brothers with the same rights to live as we do. You could already see this in the textbook, Metaphysics Within Everyone's Reach. Science, devoid of feeling, has appraised bodies in search of that which it hears named the soul, and not finding it in the matter of flesh and blood, denies its existence and goes face to face, denying the existence of God. The soul in general terms is the set of bodies or subtle inferior vehicles in which the senses, the feelings, the emotions are rooted. And needless to say, if one works in a dead body from which the soul has been separated, it is not possible to find traces with that or those senses called the soul. What imparts joy or suffering to the body is the soul. When the body is alive, the surgeon puts it to sleep so that it does not suffer. But he ignores that it is the soul that suffers. However, the consciousness is already discovering things that make it think. Think about another aspect of the matter. It is understood. First, it found that the atom is not the end of matter. The atom, that established pattern of the human family, is not the smallest design in existence. It can still be subdivided into a multitude of corpuscles, siblings, offspring, and so on, repeating the established pattern to infinity. Of course, as above, so below, and vice versa, according to the principle of correspondence. We always find the mother with her little children rotating in contour, and since as below is also above, we expand the design until we find ourselves almost at the level of our eyes, that the eternal pattern is always in sight in the sun, with its planets revolving in contour, just like the design of the atom. Science, a little confused with so many evidences of the feminine pole and the masculine pole, first tried giving feminine names to these manifestations. At first it called the feminine pole negative and the masculine pole positive, but as time went by, it was found that there is nothing more opposed to the negative of vile than that feminine which generates precisely new forms and energies. Then they used the term cathode instead of negative, But it now turns out that the cathode is the generator of a whirlwind of corpuscles, electrons and phenomena that have upset all the accepted theories. The cathode, then, is the mother principle of electrical phenomena and of the very subtle forms of matter that science keeps finding. The cathode is increasingly being called the female pole cathode, which is much more sympathetic than the alternative that the creative corpuscles are charged with negative energy. Warning: there is nothing new under the sun. The knowledge shared here is not of contemporary origin. All this knowledge has been previously expressed by figures such as Enoch, Hermes, and above all in the Bible, as well as in the theosophical literature transmitted by the ascended masters of wisdom to Madame Helena Blavatsky. It is relevant to note that Madame Helena Blavatsky was a woman unjustly persecuted and misunderstood in less enlightened times, despite her outstanding talents. What brings a touch of originality to these teachings is the modern and simplified way in which they are presented today.
As you conclude this enlightening journey through universal laws, may the wisdom you've gained resonate deeply within your being. May you harness the power of these universal principles to manifest your dreams, transform your reality, and radiate love and abundance into the world. Remember, you are a co-creator of your destiny, bound only by the limitations of your imagination. Embrace the infinite possibilities that lie ahead, and may your path be illuminated by the light of truth and understanding. Farewell, and may the universe continue to guide and bless you on your journey.